Welcome to the Masons Podcast, your source of insight and innovation in New Zealand building and construction. Each episode explores the products, systems and solutions that support trades, specifiers and developers to deliver high quality, durable and efficient buildings across Aotearoa, New Zealand. From building envelope performance to flooring, acoustics and fire separation systems, we share practical knowledge and ideas that help shape the built environment.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm a building designer, and today I'm joined by Mason's technical manager, Arthur Whitfield. In this episode, we're diving into flexible air barriers, what they are, why they matter for building performance here in New Zealand, and how to use them properly on your projects. We'll talk through practical tips, common on-site mistakes, and the key things to get right if you want better comfort and long-term durability in your builds. And of course, we'll look at how Mason's solutions fit into all of that. So let's get into it. Good morning, Arthur. Great to meet with you this morning.
Hi, Michelle. Good to be here again.
Let's start with the Mason's Uni Flexible Air Barrier Systems, UNI PLUS and UNI PRO. So to kick things off, can you tell us exactly what these products are and what they're meant to do for the building?
Yeah, sure. So they are heavy weight, flexible wall underlays that have been put together into a proprietary system with specialised fixings and with sealing up of all of the laps and joins and seams. And they basically create a temporary weather barrier. One of the primary things they offer, usually to the builders, is the opportunity to carry on with interior works inside the building without the exterior cladding being in place. There are provisos, of course.
Great. Okay. And what would be the difference between a flexible air barrier compared to, let's say, just a sheet of plastic? I mean, a sheet of plastic would keep the water out?
Yeah, so I remember back in the day, people would often put a plastic up around the standard wall underlay whilst they were held up on their bricks, and that was acceptable. The big difference is that the underlays, like the UNI PLUS and UNI PRO, and many other synthetic wall underlays that are sold in New Zealand, are breather-type underlays. Plastic sheet doesn't breathe. What I mean is that it doesn't transfer water vapour, it blocks it. We are required to have wall underlays that allow the transfer of water vapour, and that's important to get rid of interstitial moisture in the framing line, or moisture inside of the building can slowly, I do mean very slowly, diffuse out through the underlay.
Yeah, so it's more about keeping the water out than anything else.
Absolutely, and stopping air movement.
Okay, so would you say it's mainly about breathability, strength, or which would be the most important?
Well, as far as UNI PLUS and UNI PRO are concerned, those things are baked in. So deflection of water or waterproofness, that's essential. Breathability, letting water vapour transfer, that's essential. And also stopping air movement, like creating a weather line, stopping air from moving inside of the dry framing envelope and the framing line, essential. The difference with UNI PLUS and UNI PRO is because they're so thick and heavy compared to a standard wall underlay. And because of the fixing types that we put together with them, they can act as a temporary weather barrier. That's the big difference. And what that all means is that people can carry on inside without the cladding in place. And that's a huge productivity driver. Now, you do have to have your roof on, your soffit in, your joinery in and correctly installed, and your bottom plate has to be dry enough to allow for insulation and lining.
Right, but a huge advantage, isn't it? Yeah, so it will keep the wall dry and continue to do its job long term.
Yes, that's right. It's a fantastic secondary defence against moisture, a very robust air-sealed and water-sealed defence against moisture that finds its way into the cavity or forms in the cavity. Right. If there is a cavity, there is direct fix options as well. So definitely Rolls-Royce laddered up your underlay.
Fabulous. Okay. And of course it lasts the life of the house?
Yes, it has to.
Yeah, fair enough. And what's the difference between UNI PLUS and UNI PRO?
The key differences fundamentally are that UNI PRO is much heavier than UNI PLUS.
Okay.
Therefore, it can carry more additive. It can block the UV for longer. And it's just its material properties are more robust to begin with. So they're both extremely strong and resilient and robust. UNI PRO is more so than UNI PLUS. UNI PLUS is fire retardant. UNI PRO is not.
Right.
There is a reason behind that. Probably don't need to go into that here.
Yeah.
But you actually don't require building underlays in New Zealand to be fire retardant unless they are exposed to human-occupied spaces. It's a funny little thing. But what's happened is the industry has just become accustomed to specifying fire retardant wall underlays.
They have, yes.
It's just the go-to. Some people think you have to have them around fire separations. You don't. So it's just one of those funny little things.
Great, okay. What's actually in the UNI Flexible Air Barrier System?
when we talk about the system, so you clearly got the UNI PLUS flexible air barrier product itself. So you've got a very thick, heavy, multi-layer underlay. Then you have the cap nails. So the cap nails are a fixing that are adapted from the USA and Canadian market, and they're primarily used for fixing roof and wall underlays over a rigid substrate, like OSB or ply, which is what they do over there. They skin all their frames up with those. We then make sure that all of the overlaps are sealed with their 40 below tape product, platinum or flex for preference. Penetrations are sealed with their penetration seals.
Yeah.
And then if there's light timber cladding, you have your cavity, how you have your vermin strip at the bottom, and that helps tie everything together. So Pefrod around the windows, sealant or expanding foam, you have a really, really good barrier line. Yeah, that primarily is the system.
Okay, yeah. And of course, it's that multi-layer structure that creates the superior weather protection. In regards to durability, strength and performance?
Yeah, well, it's certainly, yes, it is. I mean, but the assembly of the products into a system is what really provides the benefits. Yeah. But yes, the multi-layer, heavy, robust underlay, definitely a big part of it.
Yeah, have to be quite tough and not so easy to damage during construction.
That's right. It is pretty robust, but we do always, in our instructions and in our on-site checklists, we do encourage someone who's supervising the site to have a look every now and then just to see if there has been some accidental damage to it, because obviously if you're relying on that for 3 months or up to 5 months to act as a temporary weather protection, and if you have insulated and put the interior linings in, you don't want somebody backing a ladder into it and gouging it and letting weather through. So it's important to inspect and patch those straight away if there's damage.
Okay, thank you. And Mason's UNI PLUS and UNI PRO flexible air barriers, how are they different from the other underlays out there?
Right. So we all know about what's commonly called building paper. So your standard flexible wall underlay, which we see all around the place, really common. It is much heavier and much thicker. In some cases, it can have more UV exposure, but the fixing method and the need to seal up all the laps and joins is different. You don't need to do that with your standard wall underlay.
Right. Okay.
And then moving up from the flexible air barrier range, you have your rigid air barriers, of which are well known, well used, well accepted. They are an excellent choice, but there is a substantial amount more labour involved. So you go there if you need the attributes of rigid air barrier.
Okay.
Primarily, I guess, there are a few other things we could mention, but those are the big three.
Yeah. So UNI PLUS and PRO, they've got a few tricks up their sleeves. So that's why people are choosing it over other standard options on the market at the moment.
Yeah. So what's happening is particularly builders, constructors, group builders are working with their designers. They're asking for UNI PLUS mainly, and that is because they don't want interruption to their schedule. They want to get to completion dates, turnover time on time. There's cash flow implications, satisfying clients, and using a product like UNI PLUS can enable you to do that. Because if you're unlucky enough to have a delay with the bricks or the bricklayer, if the ship bringing the cedar over or what have you is held up, you do not need to reschedule your interior works.
No, fabulous. Okay, and as we all know, time overruns are probably the biggest contributor to increased project costs out there. Are there any other considerations that a builder or a designer would take into account that would determine their selection?
There's some people who like to select UNI PLUS or UNI PRO just because it's a significant upgrade from a standard wall underlay.
It is.
It does cost more, and there are some more specialised fixing requirements, but there are a number of people who call it up as a standard wall underlay. Okay. Now, I don't mean to be confusing. What I mean is, instead of putting barricade FR up, just with stainless steel staples and blue wrap strap or something, they will call up UNI PLUS instead.
Right.
And so in that case, they're not using it as a flexible air barrier, and this does cause some confusion. They're just using it as a common or garden standard wall underlay, except they've just upgraded its weight and its material properties, basically.
They're not installing it as a wall underlay, they're installing it as a flexible air barrier.
Other way around. Right. So they do install it just as a common or garden wall underlay, just with staples.
Oh, they do. Yes,
and they don't seal the laps.
The actual installation.
I hope that hasn't caused any confusion.
No, not at all. It's the installation is as per an underlay.
We're seeing more and more of that.
So that's great. It keeps the build moving. It provides flexibility in the build schedule.
If it is a flexible air barrier system, I must emphasise, you can't just use it as a standard wall underlay and enjoy those benefits.
No, it's got to be installed in the correct manner.
As per the system.
And it's cost effective in comparison to a rigid air barrier, still giving you some of those benefits of a rigid air barrier.
Can we talk about that? Because I know there'll be listeners who are big fans of rigid air barriers. And I just want to acknowledge that. So rigid air barriers do have a lot of benefits for the building, for the occupants over the long term, you could argue, and a lot of designers really like the certainty that comes from the bracing schedule, the tie down, perhaps fire resistance, perhaps the acoustic performance, a little bit more sound deadening. Like there's a whole host of benefits that come with rigid air barrier. And we acknowledge that. Rigid air barriers, the materials themselves may not cost that much more than a flexible air barrier set of components, but the installation cost is where it takes it to like way up.
Another level, doesn't it? Yeah.
The designer and the constructor and ultimately the client for the building needs to be sure that those choices are the right ones. And in some cases, a flexible air barrier will give the designer and the builder and the building owner what they need, and the money saved can be turned into things which they might enjoy over the long term. Who knows what that might be? It might be fittings, fixtures, decoration. It might be a solar array.
The
money
things
you can save can be quite considerable.
Yeah, thanks for that, Arthur. Let's talk about money for a second. How does UNI Plus stack up on a price compared to other flexible underlays out there on the market?
Right. Okay. Look, these are just rough numbers, everybody, that I did with our own products. So, for example, if we talk about a standard 3-bedroom standalone home, it would possibly cost, I'm talking materials, about $800, something like that for barricade FR, not really including tapes or anything like that. UNI Plus would be at least double that. And if we took one of our rigid air barrier products, you would be talking 3 or 4 times.
Right, yeah. So it can be, considerable
it all depends.
Difference. But of course, it's a bit of upfront cost for peace of mind, isn't it, as well, further down the track?
I guess the easiest way to leave that is that if you take a standard wall underlay, it's perfectly acceptable. But if you get caught out with your cladding, you can't carry on inside.
That's right.
What people are doing is essentially by doubling their underlay costs by using UNI Plus, they then buy themselves the opportunity to keep their productivity, their work schedule moving if they are held up with their cladding. That's the difference.
And it's important to include all those things and take those things into consideration.
Well, I guess what we're seeing is, and it's sort of taken us by surprise a little bit, is so many more building groups and builders and people constructing buildings are electing to use a flexible air barrier. And we think it is so to give them that opportunity should they need a rise.
For sure. So, that makes sense why builders are choosing UNI over the cheaper options. I mean, it's really about the value and not just about the price tag, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah. So tell me, does the installation method change anything for the builder compared to standard underlays? And are there some tricks to getting it right?
Most definitely. So with standard wall underlays, you usually use stainless steel staples and you use blue wrap strap at 300 intervals. You use the staples at the intervals laid down by standards. You don't require to seal laps. There's nothing particularly special. A lot of builders take a bit of care and pride putting up their standard underlays, getting them looking really smart. Now, when you come to UNI Plus, it's a different ballgame. There is a fixing schedule, and that is to the wind zone, it's to the stud set out.
Right.
It's whether you're using bricks or whether you're using other claddings and whether you're using battens and that sort of thing. So it's really important, first thing, to study that fixing schedule. It's been tested and engineered, so it needs to be checked.
Takes a bit of thought and care with the installation.
Right. You don't need to use wrap strap, sometimes called Dan band, with UNI Plus, as long as it's pulled tight across the studs. So you don't need to do that. There's only one exception where we would encourage builders to be really careful, and that is where the studs are at 600 centres and you've got light cladding and you've got a very narrow cavity. If you don't get that UNI Plus really, really tight, when people put the insulation in, if it billows in and closes up the cavity, you're going to have a problem. So we do say wrap strap could be used in that situation only. 600 studs, 20 mil cavity. We actually probably suggest people do use it to prevent problems for themselves.
Yeah, makes sense.
Apart from that, and the other things, all the laps, all the joins, all the seams must be sealed with 40 below tape.
Yes.
Absolutely must be sealed.
So installation's quite different. It has to be
horizontal and vertical.
Yeah, okay. And is there some kind of checklist to help the builder make sure that they get it right first time?
Most definitely, because it is a proprietary system and it needs to be right to actually have the right benefits for the building. We do have a checklist which people can find on our website at mpb.co.nz, systems, uni, and then go in to navigate to UNI Plus or UNI Pro.
Okay.
That's very important too. And we encourage builders to have that done, completed before the appropriate inspection.
Great. Okay. And I see Uni Plus and Pro both have a blue side and a white side. If I'm driving around an area where there's a lot of new builds, and what colour would I expect to see exposed to the outside of the building
blue side
to
out.
being clad? Yeah,
always blue side out. And it's not directional. So people ask this, can it be run, sometimes if they're reusing offcuts and making the most of their material, we'd have no problem with which way you run the Uni Plus or Pro, but it's got to be blue side out.
Great. Okay, good. Getting down to the nitty-gritty here, what should builders really focus on to make sure the installation job is done properly? Where are some, real points of concern?
First thing is make sure it's pulled tight over those studs.
Yeah.
If you do that, you potentially avoid issues. Must use cap nails. Do not use staples. Do not use cap staples. Do not use any other fastening. Must use cap nails. The only other way of restraining Uni Plus to the frames that is being tested and approved are various battens.
Yeah.
So please consult the fastening charts. We worked with solid timber battens, castellated timber battens. We have got sign-off on CLD battens and our own ventilated plastic battens. Any other batten types really need to be thought through.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
EPS battens do not restrain. They can be used.
Right, okay.
They can be glued on, no problem there, but there's no restraint there.
Okay.
So that needs to be cap nailed up
at
the right
enough.
centres.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's some great tips there. Thanks. Also, if we're looking at overlaps around windows and doors, are these key points to pay attention to? Would some small mistakes in this area affect performance?
When you mention overlaps, what are you thinking about?
Well, overlaps they're actually sealed, so it's probably not too much of an issue. But around windows and doors, were you bringing it into there?
Okay, so in terms of windows and doors, any opening in the framing line, you need to have a bit of attention. So the Uni Plus is folded into the framed opening just as you would with a standard wall underlay. And then you use the flashing, you might use the corner guards down at the bottom with the sill jam intersection, or you'd cut a corner soaker out of the tape and then you use the 40 below flashing tapes, either platinum or flex, to seal the sill jam intersections and also the head jam intersections, just as you would with any other flexible wall underlay.
Yeah,
and you only require one layer on the sill now.
Yeah.
That's something that's changed recently.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is there any common mistakes that people get when dressing your underlay into these, wall openings or window openings? It's pretty simple.
Well, actually, no, let me go back. The mistakes that can be made is that where people don't use the specified tape. So, for example, I get rung up or we get, oh dear, the merchant has accidentally supplied something else and the guys have used it. What do we do?
Okay.
That's a tricky one. And the reason is that it's a code mark approved system. We've tested our flashing tapes with our underlays.
Yes.
And for whatever reason, with the Uni Plus product, not everything sticks that well to it.
Okay.
So it is important to use the right tapes. What we will do is we'll have a look at it. If we can help, we will. Sometimes that we have to tape over or remove and retape or what have you.
Right.
But we're sensible about that. And if they're very similar types of products, we'll try and help. But please, everybody, do use the specified tapes.
Specified tapes.
Yes.
Compatibility is important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, compatibility, yes, and then there's warranty, but it's about actually getting a permanent job that lasts the life of the building.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Let's say a council inspector comes to site. Do they look at anything specific when they're coming to checking the installation of an air barrier?
They would typically compare to what Masons publish as the installation instructions. I mean, they have a big job and a heck of a lot to think about, but they would mostly be looking for, is the product being installed correctly? So is it neat and tidy and taut? Have the correct fixings been used? Have they been used at the right centres for the wind zone and the studs? Have the correct battens been used as per Mason's specifications? Yeah. Have they been installed correctly? And they would look for things like, have penetrations been sealed well? Have customers used the right flashing tapes?
Yeah.
Have they used the right penetration seals? And is there anything obvious that's going to let weather through that temporary weather barrier?
Great.
That's what they tend to look at.
Yeah, and they do have a lot to cover, so they would have to make good reference to
we get some great questions.
Specifications and instructions.
Yeah, look, there's some really thoughtful people out there. I get some really interesting questions because all sorts of things happen on the job, shall we say, and we have some great interactions with the guys.
Great, okay. Let's talk about wind zones. The underlays are deemed suitable for all areas in New Zealand, up to including extra high. Yeah. Can you walk us through how wind zones might make a difference to the installation of Uni Plus and Uni Pro and what we should specifically look out for?
Yeah, right. Okay, so, I mean, I'm sure much of the audience is familiar that wind speed and wind pressure are major factors with things like cladding and the effect on the building. So when you have got a product like UNI PLUS or UNI PRO that's temporarily the external skin of the building, acting as a temporary weather barrier, it then becomes subject to the force of wind. And what we're really concerned about is not wind pressure pushing onto the building in terms of the UNI PLUS or UNI PRO. We're worried about change of pressures, change of direction, and essentially suction force, trying to take the flexible. That's right. That's the big concern. So what does that all mean? What that means is that the fixing schedules tighten up.
Yes.
That's the first thing, because you've got mechanical characteristics between the fixing and the properties of the underlay, and at certain wind pressures and speeds, they're overwhelmed.
Yes.
So we've done a lot of testing, and I know this basically was a bit of a shock for the building community when it came out, but we are confidently saying that the products can be fitted in extra high wind zones to the framing without a rigid underlay behind them.
Okay.
So that is a point of difference, but it's crucial that the builders follow the published instructions and fixing schedule. The other thing that happens in the higher wind zones, so very high and extra high, we make mandatory the method that you'll find in E2A as one as an alternative. The head flashing has to be sealed not with a strip of tape, but there must be a second layer of UNI PLUS brought down from a logical break in the building.
Yeah.
That might be an overhang, it might be a soffit. It has to run all the way up so it's completely protected from water getting into it.
Yes.
And secondary to that, the DPC, plastic DPC, has to be carefully folded in around the jambs and taken up, notched and taken under the head flashing. So we then have a complete gravity lap, a watershed gravity lap. It's actually amazing how well that deflects the weather. So that's very important. And if people don't do that, if we had a big weather event come through, you could have issues.
Yeah, it's not fixed properly.
Yeah, so let's do it right.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, all these small changes up front can save a lot of headaches later. More often than not these days, we install battens over the wall underlay to provide a drainage cavity between the cladding and the air barrier. Is there anything special to watch out for when installing battens over UNI PRO or UNI PLUS?
The main thing would be just to look at our fixing charts and check what's okay. So if you're using solid timber battens and they're continuous and vertical, you're pretty safe.
Yes.
You can do that pretty much at any wind speed or pressure, any framing set out, you're good. They're just so tough and just so capable. Now, if you're using horizontal timber battens, castellated battens, similar, except that once again, you're going to have a look at your wind speeds and your framing set out. Horizontal battens don't have as much restraint as vertical up and down the studs unless they're fully nogged behind. So people do need to think about that. Likewise with CLD type battens, vertical or horizontal, there is a different fixing pattern and it has to be run with a James Hardy recommended fixing pattern.
Okay.
My advice there is battens are a fantastic way to fix any underlay, especially UNI PLUS and UNI PRO. This the best restraint you can have is well-fitted battens, but you must please look at the fixing charts and follow them.
Okay, yeah.
As well as
Good
referring
advice.
to the cladding manufacturer's requirements.
Yeah, absolutely. Do builders need to be concerned about the compatibility of other materials? I guess, specifically sealants and expanding foams, which are likely to come into contact with the underlay.
Okay, let me break that into three parts. So first of all, compatibility, we often think about flashing tape compatibility with sealants and foams. And this goes back to the older style flashing tapes, which the glue line is modified bitumen. We still have one like that. Very common problem earlier days was sealants reacting with the modified bitumen glue line. People talk about compatibility. That's often what they're talking about. So 40 below, which is the tape for the system, there is no issue with any modern sealant or foam that we know of.
Thanks.
So the second part of that is builders may not be concerned, but facade engineers and some architects are concerned with whether the sealant they choose for the air seal around the joinery is going to effectively bond to the UNI PLUS and the 40 below.
Right.
The only way to establish that is by testing. So we've done a whole round of testing with Sudal. We have got a whole lot of published results from that. So people can actually go and look at that, which sealant, which expanding foam, which underlay, which tape, and make their own decisions. Now, guys, we really welcome doing that process with other premium sealant and expanding foam companies. but you will find published charts there
Right.
online.
Yeah. So with the testing, a designer can be confident when specifying these sealants with underlays and flashing tapes because there's testing, so that's great.
Yeah.
What if you have a scenario where a builder swaps out components, for example, different flashing tapes or fixings? Would that cause any issues?
Absolutely.
I know it's not ideal, but it does happen.
From a technical manager's point of view, if any other flashing tapes are used or any other fixing tapes are used, that's outside of the code mark system. So it's no longer part of our code marked and proprietary system.
And warranted.
Well, essentially, it's a major issue.
It is.
Yeah. So the system is actually no longer a Mason system.
Yes.
It's really important people use the right components. Look, people make mistakes. We're human. Occasionally, people will get mixed up and send a different type of fixing to site. Can I please plead with the building contractors to ask questions, get on the phone to their rep? Sometimes I've been to sites and there's a mixture of tapes being supplied. Look, people are doing their best. I'm not having a go at them, but it's really annoying because the builders then do their best and they're on a clock. They get it all up. And then someone turns around to me and says, hey, how do we get this past the inspector? Guys, let's just get it right at the start if we can.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, just don't go down the wrong path to begin with. Yeah. Have you ever encountered any issues on site from using a product that's different to what Masons has specified?
The issue is usually that it's discovered either pre-inspection or during inspection. It slows things down, holds things up. We do our best. If the product we know is a really high-spec, compatible product, brands appraised, code mark certified, and we know it will bond well to uni, we try not to make problems. But occasionally we have to ask that the Mason's product is installed over or the other one is removed and Mason's products are reinstalled. That's just so that we can make sure that everything's compliant.
Yeah, sure. And I can imagine just around openings or corners or something, it's more important to make sure that all these things are compliant.
Anywhere where air or moisture can intrude, it's best to have it
points.
right. Yes.
Yeah. And if a builder mixes and mingles products with other systems, like half a standard wall underlay with half of UNI flexible air barrier, would this cause compliance issues?
If anybody asked me if that was okay, I would say no.
It's not ideal, but
it
could happen.
It can and it does happen. If anybody asks us if it's acceptable, we do say no. It's not as part of the code mark. It's not, but there's good building inspectors out there who really understand products and systems, and it's kind of discretionary for them. It becomes like an alternative kind of solution.
Yes, it does.
And there's discretion is used.
Okay, great. I guess of utmost importance as well is how can designers and builders make sure they're on the right track with building compliance when using UNI flexible air barriers?
First thing to think about is, does the product have a really solid way of demonstrating compliance with the New Zealand Building Code? So in our case, we have a code mark certificate of conformity. It can be found on MBIE's code mark register.
Okay.
Also, you can go to the Mason's website, mpb.co.nz, search for systems, uni, and then go to UNI Plus or UNI Pro respectively. And I believe there will possibly be a link that will take you to that code mark certificate, or just ask us.
Yes, great.
That's the key one. The second thing would be a set of installation instructions, and the fixing chart's very important. Then the on-site checklist. Those are probably the main tools to make sure people find themselves with a complying installation. I don't want to make it sound difficult. It's not. Most builders are all over it. It's quite similar to what they do every week, every month with standard wall underlays, just with a few key differences.
Great. So all of these things, they make it so much easier to tick the BCA boxes along the way.
Absolutely. And then we have inspections for a reason. We want long-lasting
Admin is a big
buildings.
part of it. Yeah. Yes, that big part of it is about getting these specifications and the documentation right on paper for consent and on site for the inspections. Amazing. So it's a well-proven system and designers can specify UNI Plus and UNI Pro with confidence. Also, Arthur, listeners might want to know what sort of support can builders and designers get from Masons when using these products for the first time.
We do welcome inquiry to ourselves. People can reach out through specify@mpb.co.nz. Ring us. You'll find our information on our website, mpb.co.nz. You scroll down or say contact the team and you'll see our photos and our phone numbers. Builders and constructors, if you haven't used UNI Plus before, we really encourage you to reach out and we'll come on site if we possibly can and do on-site training.
Fabulous.
And LPB points can be awarded for a decent training session.
Yes, great.
And lastly, we do publish a uni installation video, which is available on YouTube.
Right, super helpful.
That's both in English and standard Chinese.
Oh, brilliant.
So,
yeah. Okay. So just to recap a bit here, Arthur, tell us again why people should spend that little bit more on a Mason's flexible building underlay than just a standard flexible wall underlay.
If I put my salesperson's hat on for a minute, there would be two major selling points. The first one is to the builders or constructors, and that is that you are able to carry on with scheduled interior works, all things being according to the system, if you have hold-ups or delays with your exterior cladding. It's a productivity driver, it's a cash flow driver, it's a turnover to the client on time driver. The second thing is that there is a really substantial upgrade in the secondary line of defence over the life of the building. You have got a lap-sealed, air-sealed underlay layer.
Yeah.
Those are really the two
quality
biggies.
Underlay. Yeah. So it's not about just the price tag, it's about the value and performance you're getting, which makes it easier to see why builders and designers are choosing these products over just the standard options. Fabulous. Thank you so much for that, Arthur, and we will see you again in our next podcast with Masons.
Look forward to it. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Masons podcast. We hope you've gained some practical insights and ideas for your next project. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and visit us at mpb.co.nz for more information on our product systems and solutions. And join us next time as we continue to explore smarter ways and solutions for building in New Zealand.
This podcast is for general information only. While we aim to provide accurate details on building products and systems, Masons is not liable for reliance on this content. Always follow product specifications, manufacturer's instructions, and relevant building codes.